neighbor. And so this thirst for wealth causes us to violate or even ignore the two most important commands Jesus ever gave us. And since these are the greatest of all commandments, then it's also the greatest of all sins. In other words, the love of money, the lust for wealth, the desire to be rich can lead to the greatest of all sins. Money may be an attractive idol, and it is. Money is very attractive, but it's a harsh and ruthless master. As I read earlier, Jesus told us that all of us serve something. We all serve someone. Serving money will breed anxiety and pride and fear and selfishness and loneliness and ultimately our own destruction. However, if we choose to serve God, that will bring freedom and joy and peace and hope and love and genuine contentment. As a God, money promises a lot more than it can deliver. As the God, Jesus delivers a lot more than he actually promises. So what do we do? What do you do if you, like me, discover that there's love of money in your heart? The desire for rich has gripped your heart. Now what? How do we stop loving money and get back to loving Jesus? Well, Paul talks about that too. In verse 11, he says, flee. Flee from all this. The temptation, the foolish desires, the ruin, destruction, all of it. Flee. Now, that word flee really got my attention because it sounded familiar. So I chased that throughout the New Testament. And what I discovered is that there are only two things in all of the New Testament that we're ever told to run away from. The only two things we're told to run away from. One of them is sexual temptation, 1 Corinthians chapter 6. And the other is idolatry, 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And the love of money is a form of idolatry. So you see what Paul is saying here. There's a hidden emphasis here because all of us know, we all have experienced or seen or witnessed how destructive sexual immorality can be. It can destroy lives and it can wreak havoc in people's lives. And what Paul is saying, that this kind of sin, the love of money, is in the same category of sexual temptation. And so if you discover the love of money in your heart, run. Turn away from it and run for your life. And then he says, also, while you're running away from something, run to something. Pursue. Flee and pursue. Pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. So we're to forsake the love for riches, turn and flee from that, and pursue God and the things of God. One other thing I would suggest as a strategy for breaking the grip of greed in your heart, I mentioned a few weeks ago, is to come in the opposite spirit. If you find your heart consumed with the love of money, you can break that power by coming in the opposite spirit. In this case, it would be to give it away, to give your money or possessions away. And I'm going to come back to that in a couple of weeks when we revisit this passage. So I'll leave that there for now. But let me offer us an experiment. I'd like you to try this, a little exercise that I challenge you to do. This is going to take you a little time, so make sure you make time for it. But I'm asking you to get a sheet of paper, a blank sheet of paper, draw a vertical line down the center, creating two equal columns. Label the left-hand column needs, and label the right-hand column wants. And then I'd like you to just do an inventory of everything you own. Everything you own. And itemize that list. So for example, with clothing, you don't just write down, I have some clothes, but how many pairs of jeans do you really own? How many pairs of shoes do you own? How many blouses, how many suits, how many dresses, how many ties? And then if you own your own home, figure out the fair market value and write it down. And when you write down food, you don't have to write, I have a jar of mustard. And, you can just write down how much you spend on a weekly or a monthly basis for your food. And how many cars do you have and what are they worth? And calculate the total value of all your insurance policies. Do it all. And when you've written down everything you can possibly think of, you'll have a comprehensive inventory of all your possessions. Then when you're done, I'd like you to take a look at it, go back over it and just look at it and observe how many things are in the needs column and how many things are in the wants column. Now here's where it gets interesting. I want to challenge you to lay that list out before the Lord. And here's where it's critical. Make a commitment in advance. Make an advanced commitment that you will sell or give away anything he tells you to. And then ask him. Ask him if there is anything in your want column that he does not want for you. Perhaps there is some possession of yours that competes with him for the affection of your heart. He might ask you to get rid of it. Perhaps you'll discover that you're actually spending more on entertainment and vacations than you are on foreign missions. He might ask you to adjust your budget. Of course, I have no idea what God's going to say to you, but I encourage you to listen very carefully and honestly to his voice, and then obey his prompting, whatever he tells you to do. Because even if it's initially painful, in the end, obedience always breeds freedom and joy. Now, I know that many of you aren't going to do that. I know that many of you are not going to do this exercise. Some of you aren't going to do it because it would just take too long. I mean, you just have so much stuff. That's too hard. I know that some of you are not going to do this exercise because you're actually afraid of what God might say. You're afraid that he might ask you to give something up or to give something away. If that's the case, if that fear is in your heart, what does that tell you about what you really love? I know some of you will not do this for a variety of other reasons. There could be all kinds of reasons. And please hear me when I say, I'm not saying that if you don't do this exercise that you're a bad Christian or that you're sinning in some way or that God's not going to like you as much. Do it or don't do it. Regardless of what you choose to do, it's not going to change how God feels about you at all. But it might change how you feel about him. So I challenge you, I encourage you, do the exercise. It's just a tool, and it's just a way to test our affections and our loyalties. It's a way for us to say to God, Lord, everything I own is already yours anyway. And so if there's something that you want me to sell or give away or no longer buy or simply do without, you just say the word and I'll do it. I dare you. Encourage you. Try it. Let me close by saying once again that money is God's chief rival. It is the chief competitor for our affections and our worship. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. So let's root out the root. Root out the root. Let's not love money anymore. Let's not fantasize anymore about becoming rich. Let's not pursue wealth, because that only leads to the greatest of all sins. Instead, let's love the Lord our God with all our hearts and with all our soul and with all our mind. And let's love our neighbors as ourselves, because these are the greatest of all virtues.